I backtracked him and real quick, and he had just gotten out of his bed. His bed was 200 yards from the road in some cedar thicket. He had just gotten out of it. I said, wow, I am literally right behind this buck. So, I put on my stuff, grab my gun, and I head off. And
welcome back to another episode of Northwoods Whitetails podcast. We are joined today by a special guest. We've got Gracie Ryder in the house and her handler,
Cory Ryder.
And then we've got Brent Dragon and Travis Williams. We are down here in central New Hampshire at Trav's place. Thanks for hosting, Trav.
You bet.
As some of you have seen, we're obviously good friends with Cory. Cory spent a lot of time with us last fall chasing down bucks, and we're excited to get him on the podcast, and Gracie's excited to be here too. She's like, feed me, Dad.
It's a bit warm.
Go get Tucker again. We had to separate the two because my dog was not leaving her alone.
So, Cory, let's talk a little bit about bucks. We'll talk about antlers later. YouTube channel, you have got a significant following on YouTube. Your channel is called
The Maine Woods.
Yep. And how'd you get into tracking?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about, is why I started hunting and how I got into tracking, because in the grand scheme of things, it's a bit unique in that I didn't grow up in a hunting family. Like, it wasn't necessarily passed down, or I didn't learn from my father or my grandfather like a lot of people do. Both of my grandfathers were not hunters. My dad was not a hunter. He got into hunting because I was getting into it, and my interest in it is what got, I was with him. I was with my father when he shot his first deer.
No kidding.
So that's a rare thing. And so it was my own desire and interest that got me into hunting and self-taught tracking and all of that.
That's pretty cool. That's very cool. So, rewinding, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Grand Isle, Vermont.
Yeah, there's not a lot of tracking woods there.
No, there's none. And there's no, big woods. There's no real great opportunities to hunt small parcels of land, posted, private, backyards.
Yep.
Things like not ideal.
Yep.
Makes sense, though. It's that green plate blood, I'm telling you. My dad grew up in Windsor, Vermont. I grew up right across the river, and obviously we were sitting here with two green plates. I'm telling you something about them green plates.
Yeah, and it was just my just from early on that, love of nature, wildlife, wanting to get immersed in it, and guys like Daniel Boone, Simon Kenton, Lewis and Clark, the frontiersmen, the mountain men, all that stuff is what fascinated me. And, wanting to have that connection with nature and with life, really. And I've found that in hunting. So that's kind of what led me into hunting, and ultimately where food comes from, and that intimate connection with that is you can only get that through hunting. And so the more I've done it, the more I've gotten into it, and the more I've enjoyed it, really, Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of the things that I feel like our youth is missing. You don't grow up on farms. Like when I was a kid, we had pigs and turkeys and chickens, and, I go out and I can remember the first time helping my dad harvest the turkeys, and I was covered in blood, But that's real life. And I can still remember the first year I ever shot, it was a doe, and I mean, technically, I don't call it my first deer, but it technically was my first deer. But, that connection, like you just said, with the food, and knowing that you just took a life, and the emotion that comes with it. But I think it's also very important because I understand now, as you sit down for the, what sacrifices were involved, and then of course the connection through the land and all that other stuff. But I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, and this is sort of funny. So I was 15 when I shot my first buck in a farm field behind my parents' house in Grand Isle there, and I remember I was overwhelmed with the responsibility of, this was a life for a life, blood for blood, and I'm now responsible for honoring this life in the best way I know how. I felt that responsibility, which is, why did I take this life? It's for food. And so, I remember no one was going to, not a hunting family, so no one was going to cook it for me. So I had to figure that out. And I'm 15. I didn't know how to cook a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You know what I mean? My buddy's dad, he had taught me how to pull the back straps out, or the tenderloins. It was the tenderloins. And I didn't know anything about it. So I went and the deer's hanging. I took the tenderloins out and I brought them inside. I'm going to figure out how to cook these because I was just overwhelmed with this responsibility of this. I'm not going to waste this animal. And, oh, man, that deer was already dead. But I killed it again in the frying pan. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was so dry and tough. It was jerky by the time I
made jerky.
So I gutted it down, and I realized, hey, if I'm going to continue hunting, which I was hooked by that point, which I want to continue hunting, I got to figure out how to cook these things. So I figured, if I'm going to turn it into jerky, I might as well do it intentionally. So I figured out a recipe to make jerky, and really good jerky. And for years, all I was doing with every deer I shot, the whole thing, backstraps and all, jerky. That's all I knew how to do. I didn't.
Oh my God, you made the backstraps into jerky.
But I did. I was that guy. But it was, it was so highly sought after. My friends all wanted it. It's really good, and I'll make it for you guys sometime. We'll bring it to camp probably. And but yeah, and I think that's really important. Obviously I've had this conversation with Travis and others of the element of trophy hunting. There is a trophy associated with it, but it's the food, and the trophy is the reminder of that food, that life that it provided, and they're not two separate things. It's one connected thing, and people often forget that, especially nowadays.
Yep.
No, and I'm super glad you brought it up, because it's like I always talk about, like, here in the house. It's not something I like talk about with friends as much because they're not here when I'm cooking food, but like I absolutely love venison. And much like you, I'm very passionate about cooking the venison, and I reverse sear my tenderloins, and personally I think I have it down to an art, And I love it when somebody comes over like, "Oh, let me show you how I cook it." Like John Wright comes over and he puts like a flour on it, and it's really good. And you just learn different ways to cook the game. And then one thing that I was thinking about when you were talking is the pride that I felt when I was a kid and I harvested my first deer and the entire family's eating my deer. When you're 16 or 17 years old, you feel like you provided. You know what I mean?
It's humbling.
It is. It's super humbling.
And, we talk about all of these things. You do not get that from a trip to the grocery store.
No.
You don't even, you buy a piece of meat wrapped in plastic. You don't even associate that with a life or with an animal, and you're more apt to waste it. And whereas if you hunt for food, you earn it. That's a life, and you remember that every time, and you're supposed to. It's a good thing.
Trav gets that same feeling when he goes down the aisle, get those little Debbies.
Mm-hmm. I get too many of them lately.
How's that Little Debbie sponsorship coming in?
I don't know. We got to work on that.
Yeah.
We're going to need the snacks here pretty soon.
Oh, yeah. I see you put the snack pockets in those new Johnson coats.
I did.
Yep.
I did. You like those things?
Well, they're perfectly sized to Little Debbie snack cakes.
They are. They are.
They are.
What'd you think of that coat?
I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah?
Still waiting to get mine in the mail, but...
Okay. It's coming. It's coming. What'd you think of the pants?
I think they're great. My initial reaction is like, yeah, they're onto something with this pants and jacket. It's comparable to what I've been using for years, and I think it's gonna work really well. It's a system.
Yep.
Definitely. It's definitely designed by trackers for trackers.
Sure is.
And I think it's gonna work well.
Yep.
Quality wool. Lightweight.
Yeah, the pants are 100% wool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And made by the company. Like when you think of wool, it's synonymous with Johnson.
Yeah, and it's made in America. Everything's made in America.
Yeah.
Which
I've seen a lot of positive feedback so far. There's definitely been a demand for this for a long time, and people are really looking forward to it.
Yep, definitely. So back to deer hunting. So you shoot your first buck, Grand Isle. What led you to the big woods?
Yeah, I have a connection with northern Maine, Allagash, Maine. My great grandparents had a house in Allagash, Maine. They lived there, and we went up in 2002. I think it was my freshman year of high school, I believe, Thanksgiving week, and we were using that old house as a camp and to go deer hunting for the week. Myself, my dad, and Dad's buddy Bill. Dad and Bill grew up together. Bill, I'm talking a lot about him, but he was a tracker, self-taught, same thing. His family, not a family of hunters, gotten hunting on his own, I think in his 20s, self-taught tracker, and he went all over the big woods. He shot big bucks, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Ontario, real woodsman, sleep in the truck, in the woods kind of guy, wear wool, all that, and pump action gun, you name it. He was one of those guys that was getting after it that you don't hear about, And so we went up there to Allagash for a week. I'm 14 or 15. On the way up, coming through Eagle Lake, there's a famous buck this guy shot that year, the marquee buck. It had like 8.5-inch diameter bases. You can look this thing up on Google, marquee buck, and it came from the area up there and huge. So I got a picture with that buck. It was in the back of his truck. I couldn't believe it, and there was big bucks being shot that year. It was a good year, and so we stay at the camp. If you're under 15, I think it is in Maine, you have to hunt with an adult. And so I was hunting all week with my dad, which consisted of sitting, and I was freezing to death, not seeing a deer, not far from a road. I could hear when trucks went by and stuff, and it was kind of miserable, to be honest with you. But Bill, we're on snow, and he's tracking every day. At camp at night, he'd have these stories, unbelievable stories, all these bucks he'd seen, and, maybe he got a shot, and he didn't shoot because he wasn't quite sure, and he wanted to, every day. And, moose he was seeing and everything. He'd find antlers, but he wouldn't even carry them out because he was too busy tracking, it was just, to me, it didn't make sense to me. At that age and not knowing anything about tracking, you hear these stories of a tracker, the miles they go, the things they see. To a guy that hunting is just sitting, it doesn't sound believable. And when you explain to someone what occurs in a day on the track in the big woods, they can't comprehend it. He had all these stories, and I was just sitting all week, and I didn't enjoy it, to be honest, and finally the last day, this is what got me into tracking. The last day that we were there, Bill, I don't know if he had tagged out. He might have tagged out. He shot a 200-pound buck, and he said he'd take me the last day of our hunt. So we struck out, and we cut this buck track, great big giant buck track. And I'm already like having a great time because we're on the move. I'm not freezing. I've already covered more ground in 1 hour than I had all week of hunting, And we're kind of coming along this edge of this swamp, and there was the buck walked right by. It was an old log cabin. It was just a couple log courses that were left. It was mostly all rotten. I just remember seeing that, and it looked just so cool to me to see that. It looked like I was looking at something from, the past, and I was just imagining who built it and when it was built and why and how and all of that. And this buck walked right by it, and he was heading up a ridge. So Bill is saying, he's probably bedded up on this hardwood ridge, like be prepared, So we're going along. I know nothing about tracking. I'm just following this buck track. Sure enough, it's just like the best scenario that you want. You get to the top of the ridge, the buck just jumps up out of his huge buck. That's all I remember. I was no way prepared or trained to take a shot, or even the idea that we're gonna follow this buck track and then we're gonna catch the buck and actually see him. It blew my mind when he jumped up. This tracking thing actually works. And there's buck just goes screaming off this ridge. I think Bill was telling me to shoot, and my mouth is just probably open, and I have no idea. And he takes off, and as exciting as that was, all of a sudden, I had this just sinking feeling like, oh, I just blew it. Like, that's it. Hunt's over. Like, if you're sitting and you blow your opportunity, I mean,
It's your own damn fault.
What do you do then? You just keep sitting, and so it just kind of hit me like, oh man, that was it. And so I kind of looked at Bill and, well, what do we do now? He's like, well, we just keep going. Maybe we'll catch him again. Like, so nonchalant, just that's what you do. And then it just that flipped the switch. Like, wow, we just keep going. And I knew right then, I'm like, this is the way I want to hunt. Tracking is it for me. And so I was 14, I think, 2002, and that was my first experience with tracking, and I really didn't get into it until later on in my 20s, where I got back into the big woods and really started to be able to track on my own.
So through that, you went to the you went to the military after high school?
Yep, I joined the military and went to Norwich University.
Yep. Yeah. And with that, were you still able to hunt while you were going to Norwich at all?
Not much at all. Very, very little. I mean, I did when I could, but I almost got out of hunting altogether. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the resources, and but the military had taught me map reading and land navigation skills, and that is what unlocked the door to the big woods for me. Yeah. Because now I had the confidence of I'm not worried about getting lost, right? I can read a map, I can read terrain. Even if I do get lost, I can figure my way out. And I'm not afraid to spend a night in the woods anymore. So it was like there was no intimidation anymore.
There's no fear. Survival. No. You knew how to survive. If whatever predicament came your way, you knew how to survive. You knew how to get out of it.
And now there was nothing holding me back. Whereas a lot of people, if they go out there and they start following a buck, after a mile or two, they start to get into some unfamiliar country. They don't know where the buck's going. It's taking them farther away from their vehicle, farther away from the road, whatever it is. And then they start thinking, oh, well, it's getting later in the day. Oh, well, what's going to happen? I don't know. And they start to, and they leave, Yeah. Well, when you have that confidence that if I have to spend the night, I can, I can figure out my way to navigate back to the road and get back to the truck eventually, whatever it takes. Then you just keep going.
You just keep going. Let me ask you something. We'll get back to this. When you're out there and you're tracking bucks, and I don't know how the you other guys do it, but do you every so often say, okay, truck's off to my east or truck's off to my north, or do you keep land barriers in the back of your mind? Do you pay attention to your GPS? Do you pay attention to your Onyx? Any of that stuff, or you just go and you worry about it later?
I mean, it's one of those questions. It's it's a depends answer. So, it depends on the conditions and what's going on and everything. I try to. You always want to keep your landmarks and just your bearings, but you also want to focus on that track and what's going on. I use Onyx. I tracked before Onyx. Onyx is a great tool. When I take a track in the morning, I turn on the Onyx app, I turn on the tracking feature, and I put my phone in my pocket, and it's going. And if I need that for a reference, I got it. I think it's a great tool. I've got a great partnership with Onyx. I think everyone that's going in the big woods should use it. I think you need to be able to navigate without it, though.
Right. You put it in your back pocket.
If it's your...
You press you press track, you put it in your back pocket, and you just go.
Yes.
You forget about it.
If you are solely relying on that and you drop your phone in a creek, what are you going to do? Yes. Yep. So it's a great tool. I highly recommend it. Genuinely. I think everyone here uses it. But you need to have those hard skills of land navigation to default to in the event that your technology fails.
Yep. 100%.
And a good compass.
Yes.
At all times.
Yes.
Yep. So, Norwich, you learn these life skills. After Norwich, where do you go?
I was in the National Guard. I was in Vermont. I was in Massachusetts. I had to travel around the country for different training opportunities and things like that. Nothing too crazy for the most part. I stayed around New England.
Yep. And once you got done with the military, Maine bound.
Maine bound, yeah, and I'm still working on that. That's a incomplete story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're still living there.
I
Just
still
trying to
am.
go. Just trying to go more north.
I'm not sure what I'm trying to do. You know, I there's so many places, and I want to be everywhere. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You know,
Why,
so
why Maine versus New Hampshire, Vermont, the Adirondacks, any of that?
I grew up in Vermont. Vermont has some good opportunities, but Maine has more. So big woods. Vermont has some nice big woods. Have had a lot of good hunts in Vermont, big woods. But Maine has more. So if you like shed hunting, you like tracking, just there's more of those opportunities in Maine. Maine's bigger, you know.
Yep.
And so it's a place that I call home.
Yep.
And
there's always a new adventure, it seems like, that you're on when you're out there. Going to new places, checking out new things.
There's always a new frontier. There's so much I have not explored yet.
Yep. To be explored.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes, just, you know, not only the woods and the mountains and all of that, but the waterways too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not just the Allegheny, not just well, there's all these little unknown ones or less commonly traveled ones, you know. It's almost endless.
Yep. Yep. And you're a registered Maine guide now that you're living up there. You went and got your guide's license.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So how far have you floated down that, like, St. John River?
I've paddled from 5th St. John Pond, which is in like zone 4 area, which would be south of Baker Lake to give people a reference, north of Sabumic Lake. And I've paddled that all the way to the town of Allagash.
No kidding.
I was 128 miles, I think. I do that in 2018. I've been meaning to do it again. That's a wild river. That's quite an adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you fish along the way?
I did, yeah. Muskies.
Catch some good ones?
So I had 10-pound test. So there were some real big muskies, but they just snapped my line immediately.
Oh.
You got to have that braided line, you know, heavy duty stuff. I was, you know, going at it like an amateur.
I got to tell you, not to sound like a fanboy here, but I love your YouTube channel. Like, I'll literally turn it on sometimes, and I know I've told you this, but I'll turn it on, and it's just, I want to do what you're doing so much. And unfortunately, you know, life and responsibilities that I have, and, you know, I just don't get to do it as much, but keep doing it, man, because it's awesome.
I'm trying. I mean, I appreciate you saying that, and there's a lot of people that tell me that. I get comments.
I mean, I literally
just
turn it on and do housework. And every once in a while, I'll just look at it. And I don't know about you guys, but it just takes me there. And I'm like, oh, you're cooking a steak over the open fire. You know, Gracie's laying there chewing on a moose bone, and you're restoring these cabins and stuff. And I'm just like, oh, man, it brings me there. It really does. And I think that, you know, it's important that we have people like you that are doing these things so people can see what opportunities are out there and you know, how wild Maine truly is. And it's not just Maine. There's other places that are similar. It
makes it meaningful to me because I'm doing this as a means of making a living, you know, so I can earn income doing the things I love to do. But when people say that, it's like there's more value to it than just the monetary value.
Right.
And, you know, I wouldn't trade that for anything.
We'll get him to sign your bra, Trav.
Yeah.
Before he leaves, we'll get him to sign your bra.
I don't know if I have one with me, but we'll figure something out.
Yeah.
Sign my sling.
What I really wanted to tell you guys, I kind of had to give you like the backstory of why and how I got into hunting and tracking, so that I could talk to you about Bill, so that I could talk to you about the biggest buck I've ever shot so far.
Lay it on to us, Cory. Here we go.
I think it's a good story. It's still one of my favorite of hunts of any of the hunts that I've been on. I've had some good ones, you know. So fast forward to 2015. I think I was working back at Norwich, so I only had limited time. You know, you get Thanksgiving week off, and that was it. You know, so hope it snows when I get my time off, because that's the only time I have to go hunting, and I want to track. You know, so I was that guy, and so I head to Maine, and it had snowed the night before, so I left super early. So I'm driving in the dark, and like it's fresh snow. And I get into these woods I've never been in, but I was looking at it on a map. And it's pretty big woods. I'm going to check that out. And I get out there, and there's one set of vehicle tracks ahead of me. Like, all right, somebody's out here. And I drove a long way, and I did not see any deer tracks, nothing. And I was kind of getting discouraged. Like, man, did I just pick a terrible area? There's just this void of deer. And I just wanted to go until I got to a road that this person hadn't driven already. There's a person ahead of me. And I end up coming up on the guy. It's just some old guy, and he's just putting along. I don't even know if he was hunting. He's just going for a drive. And he wasn't budging. He wasn't going to let me go by. So after following him for a while and realizing this guy is not going to let me go, there's finally one side road, and he goes by it. So I said, all right, I'm taking that. No one had driven 200 yards up that road. Giant buck track walks across it, and super fresh. So what happened was, the reason I wasn't seeing any tracks, they hadn't moved yet. It was
Snow came too early.
Yeah, it snowed, and so that buck had literally just got up and walked across the road. So I parked the truck. I backtracked him and real quick, and he had just gotten out of his bed. His bed was 200 yards from the road in some cedar thicket. He had just gotten out of it. I said, wow, I am literally right behind this buck. So, I put on my stuff, grab my gun, and I head off, and I'm tracking him. I'm just trying to go real easy because I know I'm so close behind this buck. I don't need to he's right here. I don't need to go hard. And I'm going like that, and he goes right through this super thick beech whip part of woods. I mean, it was so thick, he had knocked all the snow off going through, and there was no way I could go around it. And going through it, I was going to make so much racket, there was no chance. So I thought that I was going to see this buck. So I decided I'm just going to slam through this, get it over with, and then put the sneak on once I get through it, right? So I go slamming through this, like head down, just getting through this beech whip, and I can hear him approaching a brook. And right at the end of this beech whip, there's an old skidder path that crosses the brook. I come out of the beech whips, just flailing out of the beech whips into that skidder path. And right on the other side of the brook, that buck is standing there, not more than 20 yards away, rubbing a tree. And so he hears me pop out of the beech whips, big giant buck, really tall tines. I think he was an 8, giant body. And so he sees me the same time that I see him, and he takes off, and I fired twice. I missed. And chased him the rest of the day. Ended up seeing a small bull moose that the bucks, they can be big enough that you can mistake them for a small bull moose when they're dark furred and all of that. I mean, you talk to any guy that's tracked, and he's had that,
Especially when they're wet.
Yes.
When they're wet, those great big bucks, they look very, very black.
And this bull, he was a fork bull, and so his fronts kind of came out, and they were stubby, but they looked at a glance like end beams of a buck. And so I tracked that buck all day long, and he ended up going through this spot where he laid down a bunch of scrapes and rubs. It was a real good trail, and he just laid them down. And it was really warm that day. It was an early snow and really warm, so the snow was wet. I tracked him all day. That night, the temperature dropped, just plummeted, and it just froze that snow hard, just hard as concrete. And so the next morning, it was dead calm. That concrete snow, every step, it was just crunching and just carrying. And the trees were actually exploding. It had gotten that cold. Like, I guess, I don't know if sap had flowed and then froze, and the trees were just going off like gunshots. But it was supposed to warm up later in that day. And so I knew if I could get on a buck track that I was just going to kind of wait it out till it got warm and soft enough. It was going to melt by the end of the day, but there was going to be like a period in there where you could get it done if you could make it happen. So I was just going to look for the fresh track, and I was going to go back to where he had gone through and laid down all those scrapes and stuff. So that's where I headed off. But I got to take a step back and give you some context about what was going to happen. So after that, the day before, when I had shot and missed that buck, I decided I was going to stay in that area and hunt that area. So I went to go find a place to stay. And as I was checking in, I ran into some other hunters. that. So I ended up talking to them, going to dinner with them. Should I mention their names?
Go for it.
It was the Geyer brothers.
Okay.
Nick and Adrian and their buddy Skip. They're all really good hunters, my opinion. I've known them for a while now since then. And so went and had dinner with those guys, shared stories with them and stuff. One of them, I think it was Adrian, had been tracking a buck that day. And he's like, yeah, this buck, he stepped right over this shed antler. I was like, oh, that's cool. He's like, yeah, it was a pretty good one. 6 points. I'm like, all right, so half of a 6-pointer, so it'd have 3 points on it is what I was thinking. He's like, yeah, I'll show you when we're done having dinner. But one of the things he was telling me about while we were having dinner, he's like, yeah, we grunt a lot, and he's telling me about grunting and calling deer and all this stuff. And to me, being so inexperienced, I'm like, is this guy pulling my leg? Like, is he just trying to get me to be like an idiot out there, making to spook all these? He wasn't. He was serious, but he's like telling me, the success that he's had and how he grunts and does all these things and calls in deer and stuff. And I'm like, all right. And so we get done having dinner. We go out to their truck. And he's like, yeah, I'll show you that antler. And he pulls it out 6 points, like on one side. It would have been a 12. And it's huge,
A deer antler?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. I thought you were talking moose.
No, and the buck he was tracking stepped over it.
Wow.
And
that's cool.
Yeah.
So now you got to wonder if the one he's tracking wasn't that one, right?
And I just thought that was really cool.
That's crazy.
And so the next day, so I'm out there and I'm going back down through where my old tracks were and where that buck had gone through, laying down all those scrapes and everything. And it's just so crunchy. I try to go a few steps and just let the sound just kind of dissipate maybe and listen myself. And I'm going to try this grunting thing, So I just had this. Is it the bone collector? I think I use grunt call.
Yes, it is.
It looks like the fake antler base on the back of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was a gift. I didn't buy it, but you can make different sounds with it. So I just let it rip, doe bleat, just as loud as I could. It kind of startled me. It traveled so loud, and yeah. And then I grunt, and so I was doing that. I was making my way along, and I come across the buck track from the day before. He had come back through there like I hoped he would. And I followed that maybe 20 yards. There was 2 of them. So there were buck tracks running back and forth. And then they were all ripped up. They'd been fighting. 2 big ones.
No kidding.
And they'd been running right down that trail where all the scrapes were. And I knew they were right there. So I did that, just let that doe bleat rip, and then I just grunted, and it sounded really dumb to me, and I was standing there and I was thinking, I don't know if that's gonna work. I think this guy was just messing with me.
Scare him off.
I think Adrian was just messing with me. I've definitely scared him off. I'm not gonna see a deer, and then I hear this buck. I just start crunching and coming down through these beach whips, and I was like, man, it's so loud. It's got to be that moose from the day before. And then I could see a little bit of antler and a dark body moving through the beach whips. And I was like, yep, it's that small bull from the day before, for sure. And then he comes out, and I could see his rack. A lot of points, and I was like, wow, that is the buck. And he heard those grunts. That's what he was coming to. So he's coming in, and I just kind of shoulder my gun, and I wait for him. I'm looking at the trajectory. All right, he's coming from my right to my left. So I'm going to have a broadside shot as he comes this way. There's a downed birch tree laying horizontal between me and him. Mm. So I'm waiting for him to come past that, like past the root base of it, so I can get a shot. He turns and comes parallel alongside that. So he's 10 yards from me. But all I can see is his rack above that down birch. So now he's coming from my left to my right. And I said, all right, if I wait till he gets to the end of it, then I'll have a broadside shot 10 yards. He's going to come right past it. He comes to the end of that birch tree. The top of it had snapped off, so it's probably, 14, 15-inch diameter at the end of that. And he stops, so it's just his head, literally just his head. I can't even see his neck just sticking out at the end of that. No vitals. I can't shoot at anything. And he has his ears cocked forward. He came pinpoint right to where he heard that grunt and the bleat from, and he stood there in that posture, that just dominant posture. He just looked
Ready
like an
to kick
old
some
warrior.
ass.
Yeah, just like a warrior. No, nothing timid about him. He was the boss.
Ready to fight.
Yes. And so I thought maybe this birch is rotten enough that I can send one through it.
Oh, no.
And so I line up where his vitals will be, and I fire. He doesn't even flinch. Nothing. He didn't even move his flinchy knee or anything. I racked another round in, and I aimed right behind his ear because that's all I could see between his ear and his neck was basically C-spine. Just dumped him right there. And so he never moved. Just I saw his hoofs go up in the air, and that was it. And 209, 11-pointer, broken brow tine from fighting that other buck. So I think he was fighting the one I saw the first day, and I missed. And so he was just, his face was all scarred up. His ears were ripped. His neck was ripped. That broken brow tine. He just looked like an old warrior. And he was all skin and bones. Super long deer. His hide looked like a baggy coat. It was all just loose, just run down. And he still weighed 209.
Tail end of the season?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact date, but
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So I've shot bigger bucks by weight, but I think that was still, the biggest buck, or what I call the biggest buck. Yeah, the nicest rack.
That's pretty interesting that you thought you could sink one through that birch
Well,
tree.
I gotta know. Did it make it through it?
No. No.
We heard a story there last week with Dell about shooting the tree to get the buck to move.
Yeah. Shooting the bark off the tree.
Shooting the bark off the tree to get the buck to just move a little
Yeah.
bit so he could sink one into it.
Yeah. And so that was the first 200-pound buck that I had shot. And what was really sad, and why I was talking about Bill with all of this, is because the spring of that year, Bill had mental illness. Bill took his own life. So, I wasn't able to share that with him. And that made me really sad. And I always think about that. And, that's the guy that inspired me to get to track and, to get that first 200-pounder. And then, he was the guy that I wanted most to show, hey,
Yeah.
like, I tracked one down.
Did it?
I did it. And, so last year, my father got Bill's rifle from, I think someone in his family had it, and he gave it to me. And so I wanted to honor him, and I used his rifle last year. Some people asked me about that. It was a 7600 with a rifle barrel, plastic stock because he had broken the wood.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to honor him and use his rifle. And when I fired it before the season, it was still dead on. And so I was really hoping that I could get a buck with his rifle. And, didn't happen last year. I don't know if I'll use it again. It's just so long, that rifle barrel. It's
Snip, snip.
I might have to, yeah, if I can find someone that knows what they're doing. And
Same gun. I'm sure he won't care if you modify it a little bit.
no, he
As long
wouldn't.
as you kill the big one.
He
with it.
did. So he had the trigger lightened, and wow, it is crispy.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Huh? That's
Yeah.
cool. That's a good story.
That's a great story.
Sure
Yeah.
is.
It is.
That's kind of what I wanted to talk about most. I could go any direction you want, but
Well, we all have those. That person that got us into it, right? One
Yeah.
of those influential persons, and Bill was that for you.
yeah, totally.
You know.
And
Huh.
getting into it later on, and having some just incredible days on a buck track, and the things that I have seen, and now I think about those stories that you told me. That I literally didn't believe him at the time. Like, there's no way that you walked by a giant matching set of moose antlers, you saw two bulls fighting, you passed up a buck because you couldn't see its rack well enough, and then you did shoot at a giant and you hit a tree. I'm like, there's no way you did that in a day. But it happened.
And I think it's that, all of us, to be a tracker, there's a similarity in all of us, and it's that sense of adventure.
Yes.
And it's that sense of it's the journey, not the destination. It's what am I going to see along the way? It's not, yes, it's about the animal. We all want to shoot a big buck, but at the end of the day, it's about the hunt, not the animal. Because it's the commonality that I hear from everybody.
Because hunting is a pursuit and the adventure that you have. And that's, some of my best days in the woods, I never saw a deer.
No.
Yep. We can all agree on that.
Yeah.
I always say some of the most miles I walk is when I never find the buck track, because you're just walking, looking, in the rig, out of the rig, and frustrated, and finally you find them.
Did you have that buck on video?
No, that was way before
Yeah.
those days.
So at what point did you decide, all right, I'm going to start videoing my hunts?
It's I think 2018 or 19 is when I started doing it, and I had I'd got my guide license. I'd created a channel because I was trying to market the guide service, and then I was trying to, figure out a way to create a business with YouTube and creating media, and I started filming shed hunts and stuff, and that led to I'll give him credit, Jeff Doyle. I saw some of his videos, and he was self-filming over the shoulder with a GoPro, tracking and hunting bucks, and I was like, man, that'd be really cool if I could do that, capture that, and be able to tell these stories in a visual way. People would be into that, and lo and behold, it's a lot harder than
looks.
Jeff makes it look. And I've had a lot of failure, a lot of trial and error there, and I kind of figured it out in 2020, and I was able to track down a buck, get it on video, make a video, and that was a goal for me.
Speaking of which, is it this one?
Travis loves this video.
It's got like 300,000 views, and I'm 120 of the 300,000.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the best YouTube videos out there, I think.
Giant buck
Start to finish, everything that you did with it.
So the thing about this area, what the way I found this area with Bill, when we hunted Maine together, we found this area, and I've done a lot of hunting and shed hunting the area, so it kind of has some sentimental value to it, because I remember finding that with the adventures that we were on. It was wild back then. It was wild country, and so it's always a special place to me. So I was, I put a lot of pressure on myself, but I was using Bill's gun last year, and I was trying to get a buck in this area with Bill's gun and make it 200 pounds and get it on video. And it's like, you just
settle down a little bit.
Yeah, I could have done it, but
Yep. It'll happen where it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Still using the grunt call, same grunt call.
Same one, yeah. Same one.
Yeah, he's got you still have it, don't you?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
I had one. I lost it somewhere along the way.
The same one I have.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have had my confidence in calling and making all the deer noises that I do, even the snorting at deer. I have a great deal of confidence because it works so much.
I was going to ask you that. How did you start the snorting? Like, was that somebody show you that, or you just start doing it?
I think it was Adrian that told me when I met him there.
No kidding.
And so I'll tell you a story about that worked incredibly well. I think it was this area. Actually, it was maybe the year before this. I think it was the year before. It was in the same area. There's kind of a notch, and there's an old game trail there that looks like a hiking trail. The animals have to pass through this. It's a restriction point, and when I first found it, it looked like a hiking trail, and it's a cool spot. You can always find tracks going through there. Really hard to get to, but usually worth it when you get there. And I went up in there, and I found great big buck track. I jumped the doe, and then there was a buck track that had been with her, and he must have took off just before I jumped the doe. And I don't know what it was that alerted him, if he had heard me or smelled me before the doe took off, but I jumped her, and then I saw this running track. So I followed him, and he went up this mountain, and I knew it was a 200-pounder, so I followed him. And he went right into this green thicket right in the top. And I was just sneaking along there. There were moose around, and I was just trying to, the way the conditions were, I knew the deer were going to be bedded down. It was real windy and gusty, and they didn't like to move in that. And I was just sneaking through these kind of jack firs, and I heard hooves hit the frozen ground. Like it stood up real hard, that thud, right next to me, like right on the other side of these jack firs. And I could tell it was standing there. And it snorted at me, so I snorted back real quick, like it blew at me, like it had winded me. So I just did it right back to it, and it just jumped and took one and stopped right there. And it was so thick, I couldn't see it. I just saw a flash of it when it was right there. And I snorted back at him, and he snorted back at me. And then he just walked off. I could hear him walking through the whips. And so I walked around those jack furs, and I see his bed. And I was like, wow, this is a huge buck. He's definitely over 200 pounds. And he had just walked off. So I grunted and stuff at him, and I tried to follow him. And I went maybe 40 yards, and it came through those whips, and he was walking right back to me. And I pulled up right then, and I was, first of all, I was not sure that the camera was running because I had been messing around with it, and it didn't work when the doe jumped up. So I wasn't sure that it was working. He was right there, and I saw he was a 6-pointer, like a tall but narrow, no brow tines, big buck, 200 pounds. But he was just, and the camera wasn't on and all of that. So he slowly turns and then just lopes off. I checked the camera, it wasn't working. I ended up shooting one later that day. That was a different buck, but I called him back in again later on. Same buck.
No kidding.
Yeah.
It just the grunt and the snort and all of that. It works.
I've killed. I think I said on one of the other podcasts. I've killed quite a few deer with snort wheeze.
Yeah.
They're curious, right? Like, it's all something that you would learn where you see more deer habitat, like the Midwest, right? Where you see more deer behavior is what it is. It's the same thing here. Deer do deer things, right? It's just out there you get to experience a little bit more. You get to hear it. You get to see it. You know, to actually hear a buck roar, which, have you guys ever heard a buck roar?
Yeah.
Once.
Oh, and make the hair on the back of your neck stand up.
Yeah.
I never have. My dad did for the first time this year up there where I shot the big 8. He heard one do that. I've never heard it.
Yeah, yeah, it is loud.
Sounds like a lion.
Yep, yep.
No kidding.
But yeah. So 2020 buck.
Yeah.
We're playing it right now.
Yeah.
It's
What'd
good
that
track.
one weigh?
What's that?
What'd that one weigh?
That was 225.
Yep.
How many over 200 have you shot?
Shot or shot at? I have shot 4.
Me and Cory have something in common. We like to shoot at them and scare them.
Yeah. That's how they get big.
Yeah.
How many times did you shoot last year, Cory?
Oh, boy. I mean,
Come on. I know you've thought about this. Deer season was 6 months ago,
Let's see.
7 months ago, 8 months ago.
I think I shot 5 times in Maine. And in Massachusetts, I shot 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, that's not bad.
18 for me.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to beat Trav.
Missed that big one with a muzzle loader. Missed the one in Vermont. I think I shot 3 times at that one. Shot 3 times one, the 8-pointer I killed in New Hampshire, and 11 on the 8-pointer in Maine.
Yeah,
So-
it happens. It's not. I got a lot of ridicule for this video because how many times I ended up shooting this deer, and I'm not promoting anything reckless, and I'll speak for everyone. We're trying to kill the animal as quickly as possible. I mean, that's that's what we're trying to do ultimately, and things happen. It's an imperfect environment, and if you win the deer, you owe it to the deer to finish it off as quickly as you can, and that's what I did in this video, and most people understand that. It's funny because with this video and the type of hunting that I do, the most controversy and opposition I get is from the self-professing so-called hunters, are the ones that are offended by this. The non-hunters, people that don't know anything about hunting, that have seen this, they are so impressed. They think, wow, I had no idea that this is what you guys do to get a deer. They think it's the Hollywood version of this manufactured artificial scenario where you're hunting this exclusive property and you've got food source and this and that and all of these things and this buck that you've watched grow up for 5.5 years and you've named it and it finally steps out after you've all these pictures of it and you shoot it with a bow and all this stuff. When people see this, they go, wow, I had no idea. And they're deeply impressed.
It's so special.
But it's the guys, you're saying it's the guys that are hunters, that more so tree stand hunters that can't believe that you took a shot at a running deer.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, we've got some of that too.
Yeah, we got plenty of that.
We do.
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna have them in every group, I guess, right?
Yeah, you know, and like I said, I don't make how-to videos. This is how I do something. If you take something away from it and apply it to yourself, good, but otherwise I'm not, do whatever is right for you.
Yep.
And, I am trying to kill a deer the most efficient way that I can.
Yep.
So what happened in this video, I tracked this buck, and when I caught him, I was about 30 yards from his bed, and he stood up from his bed looking at me, but I could only see up to his eyeballs. The bough of the spruce tree was right covering his antlers. I could see his eyeballs, and he was 30 yards from me. So I put my sights right on his heart, and I was holding there, and I was looking at his head so I could see the antlers. And it's when he turned and jumped, so he tucked his legs to take off, is when I saw his antlers. So I fired, and I hit a little low. I was holding steady, but because of his movement, I hit a little low, and as he tucked up his foot, it would have been kind of under his chest, and I hit that ankle basically, and that was the only shot I had, and he was gone, out of sight. And so I went over there, and I could see a little bit of blood, and then I found the bone, which I knew was leg bone. I knew I hit him. I knew now he's on 3 legs, and which is terrible. They can go a long way that way. So I just wanted to chase him down and put him down, and I did that.
Yeah.
Is that the same buck from day 1 to day 2?
No, different area.
Want to take a break?
Yeah, I'll go let him out.
We're back.
So we were talking before the break. We were talking about calls and grunting and things like that, and how to use that, or how I incorporate that into tracking deer. And what I was just talking with Brent about is that as I move through the woods, as you guys all know, you're making noise. No matter what you try to do to be sneaky, you're going to make noise. So if you can cover some of that sounds, or just try to sound like a deer, which has to do with the way you move and how you walk, actually sounding like a deer as it walks or runs through the woods, and then grunting and doe bleats and snorting and all of those things. And really the way I've honed the calls or the sounds that I make is just from I'm imitating what I've heard deer do, and more than once, and that's where the confidence comes in. So I'm trying to do the things that I've heard other bucks do in different situations that I've been in, and the more that I've done it, the more success I've had with it, and it works. Like this year, I had a buck grunt at me right before it took off. That was a big buck, and I think it was just as I was approaching, I knew I was getting close, because as I was on that track, and that was in Massachusetts, I was seeing other deer. They were thick in this area, and so I knew I was getting close. So I was walking slowly, step, 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 step. Like deer do. They walk, they listen, and I was trying to sound more like a deer than a hunter, a 4-legged animal, and I would grunt every once in a while and listen. And I think that buck, that's what made him hesitate, because it was a crunchy day. I wasn't going to just sneak up on something by just simply walking up on it. So, sometimes it's just that 1 second of hesitation is all you need to close the distance. And, a lot of times it's like, I already blew the situation. The deer's taking off. So, I got nothing to lose by grunting at it or snorting at it, and it doesn't work every time. But
Yeah, we were just talking to Joey and I've had very little success, but it doesn't stop me from doing it. Like I wear out grunt tubes. I just blow them constantly, especially when it's crunchy or it's bare ground. When I'm tracking, I don't tend to as much. But yeah, obviously, if you jump them, you snort at them, you blat at them, and you grunt at them, and hope, and it has worked. But obviously, I must have the wrong tube, because it don't work so good for me.
Bill used to grunt a lot, just like some guys do with just his mouth. Some guys have success with that, and they're good at that. I probably just don't have the vocals to make those sounds well. I use the tube. It freezes up a lot. It'll pack full of snow. The reed gets plugged and that sort of thing. But I like having it. It's a tool. It's an asset. I've had it work. I can't really say that I've ever regretted using it. Like, it's never blown a situation or opportunity for me. So I do it.
It may put doubt in the deer that one time, you know.
Yeah.
That's that's the way I look at it.
And what I found when it works the best is when, if they smell you, they're gone. I mean, they know that smell of a human scent, and that's a threat, and they're just gone from that. These bucks live in places where they avoid humans for, they live there for a reason, and the reason's to avoid humans. So if they smell you, that's it. It's pretty much game over. But if they only hear you, or maybe they see some movement, and you make some sort of a deer noise, I mean, it triggers something in them, especially when they're in a rut, and if they're with a doe, they're expecting to be approached by other bucks. So they hear you crunching up. They're not immediately assuming necessarily that you're a hunter. They might assume or be thinking, that's another buck coming to challenge me to take this doe away from me. Because if they track down and they were dogging a hot doe and they finally caught her and they're with her, guess what? They know other bucks are going to be dogging that same doe's track. So it's, I've had many times you track up on them and they're standing there looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just stalls them long enough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and how many times have you jumped a buck up, right, out of their bed, and they run 60 yards, and you give them the 15, 20, half hour, whatever everybody does, and you see where they stood around for a minute because they didn't know what you were. They just heard something, caught movement, and to your point, if you grunt and you successfully, A, you can grunt them back, or B, maybe the reason he only went 60, 70 yards and settled down is because you snort wheezed or because you blew or because you grunted at him. And he's like, oh, I guess that was just another deer. And then they go back to doing what they were doing, and, you close the distance and you get another crack at them. It's like Brett and I were talking. How many times have you track a buck, you jump him. You track him 5, 6 more miles, you jump him again. But then when you finally, seal the deal, he's 25 yards from you. It's like, what was it that led to that success? Was it because you had grunted, and he let you get a little closer? Was it the conditions, Did you get lucky? Now, have you shot at him yet here on the video?
No. There was 4.
What went down the road in front of
4
you?
bulls. There were 4 bulls. 2.
Yeah, but what is that?
It's a bull.
That was,
right?
So I ended up, that was me.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
You're dragging your feet. You must have been tired.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like there's good snow there, too, huh?
Yeah, that was good. That was
There's
a good
18
day.
I'd have taken
Snow.
your track. You look like a cross-country skier right there.
Yeah.
I don't think you don't go 2, though.
No,
No.
not even close. Not even soaking wet.
No.
No.
How was last year? Talk about last year a little bit. You
Speak.
obviously spent some time with us. I don't know. Did you ever make a video on that? You did.
I've produced everything that I filmed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's talk about when you hunted down country with us a little bit.
Yeah.
You
It's good times.
We got to do that again this year.
Oh, we will.
Yeah.
You got into some deer.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You want to talk about one of the last days there that you caught the buck that you had been hunting.
Yeah.
You had a Travis moment, didn't you?
I did. Yeah.
And that happened to what? That happened to 3 of us, I think.
Yeah.
Good bucks, no antlers.
It's always the good bucks.
Yep.
We'll have to take my video and put it on the Northwoods Whitetails channel so everybody can see it from.
Yeah,
So
we
you'll know
will.
what we're talking about when you see my video.
Yeah.
'cause
Travis got some great
I
footage.
got some good footage of that one.
just a rutted out big old buck that had already shed his antlers.
Yeah.
He was just dazed and confused.
Man, I'd love to know what he had on his head.
The rut had taken a toll on him,
Yeah.
and that happens late season in Massachusetts. It's not uncommon.
Yeah.
It's Dustin and his dad. They found a shed antler right in a bed.
Yep.
A buck. I think one of them was tracking.
Yep.
But what you were asking about the last day, we actually had some killing conditions. It was raining and it was
A lot of
It was
snow.
rugged.
walk
that
right
day.
up and shake their hand day.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this buck that I had hunted in this area. It was a crazy thing. I had seen this track go through somebody's yard, and it was big. And I looked on Onyx, and I could see that there was some public land out there, but it was not going to be easy to get to. But I thought that this track is going that way, and that buck might be out there, so I want to go see if I can get on, because it was big, and it's hard to find a big track like that. That's really what I was looking for. So I made my way over there, and I ended up finding that buck, and his track went down and crossed a stream, and I wasn't expecting him to be. Gracie, what is the matter? Gracie's whimpering right here on my lap, but he crossed the stream, so I knew I was close, but I didn't expect him to meet with him right in that stream. So when I got down, I was tracking, I was being stealthy and sneaky and everything, and when I got down into that stream, it was the ice, it was crunchy, and the noise of the stream, I couldn't hear anything, and I was down low, I couldn't see above the bank, so I just wanted to get through that and get up on the other side where I could actually see and hear again. Well, he was right on the other side of that, like just off the bank, and he saw me or heard me when I was down in there, and he took off, and big buck. I just got a glimpse, but I fired and missed. And so I guess it was a few days later, and it was raining. And so I knew if that buck is back in that area, today's the day I can walk right up to him as long as my gun will fire, which the Woodman arm should go off even in those conditions. And I found his track, and he was right there, and he was with a pile of does. So I followed him, caught up to him, and he was just laying there with no antlers.
Nothing on his head.
Nothing.
But he had him. You said you saw him the day before, right? Or did you see antlers?
It was a couple days, because remember we had that really cold spell. We had that cold spell. You and I were down there, Cory, and we had that cold spell, and it was super cold. We didn't get right out there and go hunt that morning. We might have went to breakfast first.
Might have happened.
Yeah.
Got to support the local economy.
You do. It was good breakfast.
It was cold
good
that morning.
Yeah. Yep. So
that kind of, just the way things were going, and that was the last real good day to track. And
yeah, because it froze up after that. Yeah.
But left it there, and to be continued.
He'll be there next year, hopefully.
Maybe.
That he will.
Definitely some heartbreaks down there, but it was fun. I had a good time going down there, and it's kind of nice because, you got your New Hampshire season, and typically I try to hunt New Hampshire, and then I go to Maine. This year I went to Vermont, but that doesn't usually happen. And then for me, it's like over, and it's that like emotional dump of it's all over, and it's an whole another year away. And then Joey called and said, "Hey, I got a cabin rented down here. Why don't you come down?" And had to get clearance from the tower.
Yeah, it was pretty rough, but we made it work.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a rough time. But the wife was like, "You know what, babe? Go see your friends," and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
definitely want to do that again this year.
We'll definitely do it again. Vermont. Did you hunt Vermont last year? I don't think you did you?
I don't think I did, no.
Year before, you missed a giant.
Yeah, 252, 11-pointer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Guy dumped it later that day, right in front of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the biggest buck in the state, I think.
Was. Could have, I'm that guy. Could have been, my life has a lot of could have beens. Near misses,
Yeah. So, well, it happens. Have you ever hunted New Hampshire much?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got some nice bucks there. 2012, I was heading there from my parents' house in Grand Isle, northern New Hampshire, Pittsburgh area, and I had all my clothes in the dryer, like my hunting clothes. I didn't have wool back then, I've gone through the whole process of trial and error, what works and what doesn't, from clothing to gear to everything. And so I took off. I forgot all my clothes in the dryer. So I'm going, and then I ended up getting into there was a car accident leaving the islands, and that took a long time. So I didn't get up there until like noon. And I just hit one of the main roads. I was trying to get in the woods as quick as I could. Didn't have much time. And it was good tracking day. And like 2 miles in the main road, there's 2 bucks on a doe. Track had just crossed, and this road had been traveled by people all day, and I knew it was fresh because no one had stopped yet. So I'm like, man, I just hit it. I'm gonna make this happen. And that's when I found out I left all my hunting clothes in the dryer. So I had like a sweatshirt and jeans, and took off. And these dogs are.
We are back. We had a little dog break. They decided to fight here. So here we go.
So I had a sweatshirt and jeans, which was, all cotton, 100%, not ideal for tracking in cold, snowy big woods. So I actually was, in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm probably not going to be able to spend the night in the woods if I had to tonight. It might be a rough situation. I had no water. I'm super dehydrated, just coffee all day. And so I take off on this track, and it was a really big buck, a pretty big buck, and the doe. And I knew either one was going to be good, but I started following them, and it came to some brush and downfall, and the doe went under it, and the smaller of the 2 bucks, which was still a big buck, ducked, and I could tell he struggled to get through, but he did it. The other one attempted to go through, got stuck, and went around. And I'm like, one of these bucks is pretty big, And I was pretty green at tracking at that point, and I hadn't done a whole lot, or I had not had much success at that point. And they went up to this hardwood ridge, and I got up on top, and I kind of just stopped, and I see some other hunters' boot prints on top of this ridge.
We have a royal rumble of dogs going on here in the back.
So they get up on this ridge, this hardwood ridge. I could see pretty well, and I noticed another hunter's boot tracks had been all over that ridge. And I was kind of scanning around looking for maybe another hunter, maybe the deer, and I look over and I'm pretty green at tracking, like 100 yards away in the open, standing broadside. It's this deer. I'm like, it's too good to be true. You don't just walk up on them and then they're just standing there. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, that's a big deer. But I did not see the antlers. It was looking straight at me. So I started scanning, looking for the buck. And I looked back at it, and the sun was kind of hitting it, and I thought I saw some shining. So I had a scope on I had the Browning 308 semi-auto with a Trijicon scope back then. And I looked at it, and I thought I could see something. So I'm like, it's a pretty big deer. So I put the scope to 9 power, and I looked right at its head, and I could see the beams and brow tines. And that's when it decided to start running. So now I'm at 9 power trying to shoot at this running deer, and I think I fired 3 times, didn't even touch it. And I think I didn't wait or anything. I just took right off after it. And first thing I noticed was that was the smaller of the 2 tracks. But I stayed on that one. And I never saw the other 2, the bigger buck with the doe. But I stayed on this one I fired. It was a good buck. And I think it was not far later that all of a sudden he just, going from my right to left, he just takes off again, like real close to me, and I fired twice, and I missed. I knew I missed, and like, man, why did he stop so quickly? And then he started. I followed the track some more, and I see a little bit of blood, but I had not hit the steer. But he started bleeding, and I follow him again, and he comes to this low kind of swampy area, and he had taken this huge leap across this. There was this cleared area, open, kind of flat, smooth looking, and he had leapt right across it, a good 20 feet or more. And I didn't really process it at the time, so I step and I start sinking in. It was just a muck slough. And as I'm sinking in, I look and I can see the outline of his chest. He's only like 20 yards away, hiding behind some brush, facing me. And I aimed right at his chest, and as I squeezed the trigger, I sunk in, and I shot right under him. I shot right between his legs and everything. And he took off again. And my boots were filling up with water and everything, and I'm like swimming across this muck hole. I'm wearing cotton, and now I'm soaking wet and everything, and it's getting late in the day. Oh, these dogs.
These dogs are going to be... So you're naked because you forgot your clothes. You've shot at this buck now how many times? 3?
like 6 or 7 times.
Your bollocky bare ass, go.
And so haven't hit the buck. And I get out of that swamp muck, and he's going back uphill, and it's getting late in the day now, and he crosses the road that I had initially driven on, like not far from my Jeep, and he's going uphill. So I thought I might have one more chance at catching this buck. He's still every so often I'd find a little speck of blood, which was very strange to me. I know I have not hit this buck. I missed every shot I've taken. And so I stay on this buck, and he goes around this big ridge, and he goes up and over. The track goes up and over. So I had an idea that he was maybe going to stop at the top or on the other side. So I was calming myself down, going really slow and easy for once in the day. I had been eating snow to try to hydrate and stuff, and I was just trying to take it easy. I knew I was only going to have, with the amount of daylight, one more opportunity to catch this buck, so I had to make it count. So as I come creeping up over the crest of that hill, and I'm scanning, and it kind of dropped into a big ravine and then went up to another ridge, and I could see very far, open hardwood. I could see to the other ridge, probably 200 yards. So I'm scanning, thinking he might be over there. And as I scan around, I look kind of down the ravine and to my left, and he's about 70 yards, standing behind some brush and maybe a tree or two. But I could see it, open, broadside, vital shot. So I calmed myself, took my time, put it right there behind the shoulder, and squeezed. Shot goes off. I felt really good about it. I knew it was a good shot. He didn't really react like he was hit. He took right off, but he didn't react like he was hit. I think I was running out of rounds at that point. I maybe only had 2 more rounds, so I was trying to make him count if I actually had to use them. I'm very confident I hit the deer that shot, but he's taken off, doesn't act like he's hit at all, and he's going, and I'm waiting for him. I can see him crossing this ravine, and I'm waiting for him to just drop. And he starts to climb the other side of the ravine. I just didn't know if I hit him. So I let another one fly, and then he stops at the top of the other ravine and just starts walking. And just about as he's about to go over the other side of that other ridge, he stopped, and it was over 200 yards away, at least 200 yards. And I leaned against a tree, aimed right on him, and fired my last shot. I think was my 10th shot, and it dumped him. And as I went down there, that shot where he first took off punched him right through the heart, but he still ran that whole 200 yards.
Crazy how they
across
do that.
He was spraying like from the pump station that whole way, and then that final shot hit him right in the backside. Actually, it hit him in the left hind quarter. And so 8-pointer, he ended up weighing 189, and I was only like 0.2 of a mile from my Jeep. So, which was awesome.
Bonus.
And he had a scar on his right hind quarter, kind of. That's where that blood was coming from, not where I'd hit him. An old wound that had kind of opened up as I'd been chasing him, I think, and the blood pressure started going, and that's where every once in a while that little drop of blood came from. And so I dragged him down to the Jeep, and I was trying to figure out how to load him in the Jeep, and this truck pulls up real fast, and this guy jumps out. He's all excited. Did you just shoot that deer up there? Yeah. And he's like, oh, man. He's like, I was hunting over here, and he pointed in the direction that I had initially tracked him because he had gone one way and looped around, crossed the road, and I ended up shooting him on the other side. I was hunting over on this ridge all day because I've been chasing this buck that I shot at with my muzzleloader, and I think I hit muzzleloader seasons before rifle in New Hampshire. And he's like, I never found him and stuff. And he's like, but I got so discouraged because there was people all over this ridge. I must have heard 10 shots all around me.
That's awesome.
But I had tracked like a 6-mile loop shooting at this buck the whole time. So he thought he was surrounded by a bunch of people, but it was just me. And so I didn't know at the time, but when I ended up skinning and cutting up that buck, because I did it myself, the one hind quarter I hit was ruined. The other hind quarter had a wound channel from a muzzleloader, and the plastic ballistic tip of that round was under the hide. He had hit that. It must have been that guy had hit that
No
buck with
kidding.
the muzzleloader. So that other hindquarter was ruined. You couldn't even cut through it with a knife. The scar tissue was so thick. So there was both hindquarters were basically ruined. But yeah,
That's a pretty
Crazy.
good story.
That's a good one.
That's a pretty good story. Well, we should probably wrap it up, I guess.
We could keep going for days on this one.
We sure could. We sure could.
Sure.
Well, Cory, thanks for joining us. Where can everybody find you?
well, I try not to be found
Mm-hmm.
in the woods. However, you can find me on YouTube at the Maine Woods. I have Instagram account connected to that, the Maine Woods account. Those are the two primary places that I produce content.
Awesome. All right, sounds good. Thanks, guys. We'll see you on the next one.